This is SoundNotion, the weekly podcast for new music and music news. I'm Patrick Gulo.
I'm Dave McDonald.
I'm Sam Merciers.
I'm Nate. So earlier this week, we got to sit down with Vicky Chow and pre-record the interview. And she's a Bang on the Can all-star and also part of the Typical Music Ensemble that I get the privilege of seeing here in Grand Rapids later this week. So you'll see that interview later in the show.
Hey guys, when you are reading the 50 Shades of Grey book, like you do, like we all do, right?
I think, is definitely the important thing to say there.
Right.
When
exactly.
we read the 50 Shades of Grey book. Because not only have I read the 50 Shades of Grey book, I have not stopped reading the 50 Shades. I cannot put it down. At least 30 times through it so far.
When I'm reciting it to myself in my own mind from memory is what you meant to say.
Exactly. When you are doing this, are you playing any music in the background?
You know what I choose? When I want a true 50 Shades of Grey experience, I look for the 50 Shades of Grey album currently topping the Billboard.
What's that, Sam? There's a 50 Shades of Grey album?
You're supposed to say, tell me more.
Tell me more. No, so this is true, and we talked about this kind of a little bit before. We talked about the 50 Shades of Grey. Apparently, there's some discussion in the book of, or maybe just a sidelong mention of Thomas Tallis's Speminalium, and the popularity of the book caused a spike in sales in the music of Thomas Tallis in the iTunes store. We talked about that a couple. Say what?
Thomas Tallis has hot makeout music.
Yeah, I mean, what else would you call a motet like that? Right. So anyway, some executive somewhere saw that and decided that they needed to capitalize on this phenomenon, and they put together a compilation album, 50 Shades of Grey, the classical album or something like that, and it has reached #1 on the Billboard classical charts. Now, for those of you that are thinking Billboard classical charts is not really a great source of musical integrity, because it topped out, so it beat some kind of like pop opera Il Divo knockoff thing. But the point is, a bunch of people are buying it. So do you think this is a good thing for classical music, that there's a 50 Shades of Grey, the album?
Yeah. I think
yes.
And it's promoting classical music, however it's done. I mean, if it gets people to listen to Thomas Tallis or, whatever else might be on the album, I mean, I'm for that fundamentally.
Yeah. Do you think they're actually listening to it, or do you think they're just like putting it on their shelf like the Spanish monks and singing the Gregorian chant in the 90s?
It might get one play on their bows.
Yeah.
I think they're putting it on the and playing it because it's music they can ignore, and that's why it's popular. It's like you can engage with it or you can just turn it into carpet music. And I think that's why.
Well, what's on the album? What's everything on the album?
I don't know.
Let's look at the track list.
Research. This is what we do on the show instead of before the show. Yep. It's like a documentary. The making of SoundNotion.
See, it's helicopter music and the Roger Sessions violin concerto, and I'm not being serious.
All right. Well,
it's going to be some Beethoven and some Thomas Tallis and some Mozart and some Scriabin.
All right, here we go. You ready for this?
Let's have it.
I got it here. We have Lakme Act 1, the Flower Duet, the D minor concerto with no listed composer. Adagio. Oh, it's BW. So it's Bach D minor concerto, Adagio. We got Prelude from La Traviata. We got, of course, the 1997 remaster of the brilliant classic Academy of St. Martin in the Field Sir Neville Mariner recording of Pachelbel's Canon. We of course have Speminalium, as mentioned earlier. We've got the aria from the Goldberg variations. Approximately a greatest hits of pretty classical music. plus
I'm changing
Spemminolium.
my opinion. I think it is bad that this CD is out there
Why?
because it's spreading Pachelbel's canon in D without any regard for the human cost.
What, Sam, is the human cost of Pachelbel's canon in D?
Well, we don't have time to get into it right now.
Their humanity everywhere.
That
we
better
just
be
say
some
Amazon-
great recording.
List the stinking composers on the album page. What the heck are you doing?
This is the problem with classical
Idiots.
music and metadata.
All right, that's 90% more time than we should have spent on that story already.
All right, you know what? Maybe some of these people would listen to this album and be encouraged to go to the orchestra. What do you say, Sam?
Well, they better.
They better go soon and not in some cities.
Yeah, they better go soon. Louisville. I haven't actually read the story because they all read the same. Stuff is going badly in Louisville. Take it away.
Why do you assume that stuff is going badly in Louisville?
Because it's an article and it's about an orchestra.
Okay.
It has fewer musicians, a reduced budget, and a shortened schedule.
So this is actually kind of sort of ish good news. The Louisville Orchestra is actually playing this season. They did not play last season. So they are playing this season, and they are playing while they are engaged in binding arbitration. So the sides have agreed to an arbiter, and they are playing under some not really the best compensation, but they are playing and they are getting paid while the negotiations are ongoing. So congratulations to them. Also in Jacksonville, just up the road from me now in Jacksonville, Florida, there is some more bad blood. This is yet another American orchestra that will not be starting its season on schedule this year. I can't tell if this is a strike. The orchestra is striking, but there's a pretty serious reduction. There's a 20% reduction in compensation, and the orchestra refuses to lock out the musicians, but they also refuse to, negotiate with them for anything less than a 20% reduction in costs. So that's another orchestra that's not doing well.
That's an orchestra with only 53 core members, too. So.
Right. It's a small orchestra. And that's one thing that we haven't seen yet is any, well, not recently anyway, is any major orchestra that's going on strike, right?
Yeah, right. Wait a minute.
Wait a
What
minute.
do I hear,
Wait a
Dave?
minute. I've got breaking news. This is just being handed to me. It says here that last night, as we record this on Sunday morning, the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, a little band you may have heard of, conducted by Riccardo Muti, is on strike. Did not start their season last night as scheduled. Did you really just hit I guess I just did that whole act, but you really just hit a sound thing. We're going to take away the sounders from Sam one of these days. But the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, one of the biggest in the United States, did not start their season. The craziest thing of all is that they canceled the concert with less than 2 hours notice. And the patrons were not thrilled. Thoughts?
Yep.
Thoughts, opinions,
It just makes you wonder.
panel?
Sign of the times.
It makes you wonder what the big dispute is, considering that it came down to 2 hours to showtime before they canceled. It's either A, they were teetering on the edge of a deal and then somebody wouldn't blink, or just poor management where they were like trying to pretend that some,
Well, they were
Apex Machina was going to come down and save the day, and then they're like, oh, 2 hours? Or, excuse me, Dave. Oh, dang, 2 hours.
Note to self, bleep Sam.
Yeah, sorry. I think that's the first SH bomb I've ever dropped on the show.
Well, it just so happens, I think in this article, that they say that they were going to be playing the season while they were negotiating, and the negotiations broke down. So they were actually negotiating, I guess, on Saturday, maybe on Friday. It seems weird they'd be on Saturday. But anyway, the negotiations broke down. The two sides left and negotiations ended. So I guess the deal was essentially that they were going to keep playing as long as they were talking, and they stopped talking. So they stopped playing. So that's kind of crazy.
I mean, that's pretty.
They haven't had a work stoppage in Chicago since '91, I believe. So that's a big deal.
There is a cutting analysis in there. Orchestra revenues are growing at a small percentage, while expenses are growing at a much steeper pace. I know this is some pretty intense economics for our audience, but the input is exceeding the output, which sounds like a common story for orchestras.
Can you put that a little more simpler for us, Sam?
Need more money.
Man, what a shame to just not show up for the gig, though. Like,
yeah, I'm sure less than 2 hours before, these people are already getting warmed up and getting ready to go.
Yeah, and ticket holders that got screwed have the option of exchanging their ticket.
For what?
Refund, exchanging for another show, whenever that's going to be.
Yeah.
Or they can donate their ticket.
Oh, that's nice.
To somebody else who can't go to the show that didn't happen. I think they may donate the value of their ticket to the Chicago Symphony Orchestra.
Yes, and I think there we have the problem. When organizations that always operate on a charity subsidy kind of basis are always going to have problems.
I don't know what you're talking about. We don't have any problems, and we operate on a charity subsidy basis.
I'm saying orchestras are behind the times and cannot exist without charity.
Sure. You know who else?
That's the way it is for all arts organizations,
right? Like maybe record labels.
Even like
I can think of somebody who's existing without charity.
Oh,
who's that?
Universal Music Group.
The world's largest record label. Yes, they are existing without charity.
That's right. The picture that they use on the cover of this is the New York Times Global Business section. The picture, I think, is a very good picture for this. Like the guy standing there, like he's the king of the universe. There we go.
He's
like you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of like the Highlander when they kill the other dude and like they get all their power. And that's what's happening right here. That's Universal receiving all of the immortality power, whatever, of EMI music.
Yeah. The quickening. That's
the kind of analysis that you tune into SoundNotion for.
Yep. And Queen is playing in the background.
That's right.
So we talked about this earlier on another episode that was a proposed deal for Universal Music Group to buy EMI. Which would make it the biggest. Well, actually, Universal was already the biggest media conglomerate place, right? And now they're even bigger. But as a trade-off, they're having to sell some of their other properties to keep them from becoming too large. One of the things they're selling is Parlophone, which isn't that what Muse is on?
There are a lot of big acts that they're having to dump. Yeah,
that's the one they were using as the big symbol of like this is what they're giving up is Muse. Because those guys are a money making machine these days.
It's Muse, it's Coldplay, it's David Guetta and Pink Floyd.
Yeah, there we go.
So some big names and some up and comers too.
Pink Floyd's still a money making machine these days.
Sure.
Too.
Yeah.
So they're having to sell off the rights. That's part of the agreement with the U.S. and European regulators is that they get rid of a third of their holdings, and that includes some big names, including a couple of big classical labels, EMI Classics and Virgin Classics. So some big changes in the works. I think this New York Times interview kind of talks about there's a guy. I want to cite this guy because he said something smart. Martin Mills of the Independent Beggars Group says that it's good to see that the commission has seen to deal with this deal as such a threat to the market that it has demanded and received truly swinging commitments on divestments. However, that should not conceal the fact that Universal's arrogance has paid off for them. They have destroyed a significant competitor, and that even with these divestments, their ability to dominate and control the market has reached even more unacceptable levels. And it's absolutely true. I think it's important to note that the regulators did do something here. They didn't say this is totally, it's not completely okay for you two enormous companies to become an even more enormous company. Universal was already, I think, the largest record label in the world, and now they're just getting that much larger. EMI was one of the so-called major record labels, so they're subsuming a non-trivial amount of content and business. So they're just getting bigger all the time. But they did say, you have to get rid of these other things, and you have to get rid of them to people that can compete with you. So to try to encourage competition. So that's good to know. Say what?
They're just passing the rights to another.
They have to sell the rights, and they have to sell them to an entity that the language is something like has a proven track record or something in the music industry. So they can't just sell them to investors.
The highest bidder.
Right. They can't sell them to like speculators. They have to sell them to people that are going to like use this content to compete with this new Universal Mammoth company.
I can see that. It's
so
like,
that's good.
That's kind of weird, though. It sounds weird. Like, you must sell it to these people.
It's only not specifically these people. It's this category of people. So
there's so many groups that could compete with a behemoth like EMI, though.
Well, I mean, I think that legally that any record label, even if it's a tiny record label, is in a literal business sense competing with. Yeah, but even
what if they sold it to a tiny record label, hoping to spend a lot of money on something? Wouldn't that create more competition?
Yeah, I mean, and that record label would instantly get all the whatever that comes with having the Pink Floyd catalog. You know.
Yeah. But I mean, what if some little podunk label had owned Pink Floyd? I mean,
well, they wouldn't be a podunk. What I'm saying is they wouldn't be a podunk label anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so,
they would instantly no longer be a podunk label.
I think having like 3 big labels is better than having 2 big labels.
For the now I want to start a record company called Podunk Records. I'm sure I'm sure it exists. But I think one of the really bad things that could result from this is that this company is going to have so much control over digital distribution now. They're going to be able to really play hard with new services, in particular things like Pandora and Spotify, that have to each negotiate individually with the large record labels. We've seen before on this show, I'm sure, we've put up, there's a great infographic made several years ago before Spotify came to the US about how little independent record labels, independent artists get paid from plays on Spotify. And everybody got all up in arms about that, and with good reason. But it's important to remember that infographic was specifically referring to independent artists. It wasn't talking about how much major labels get paid for plays on Spotify. And the reason those independent artists get paid so little on Spotify is because Spotify has to work a lot harder and give much friendlier deals to the major record labels to get to pay for those plays. So Coldplay and Pink Floyd are getting a lot more for their Spotify plays than the independent artists that we all know and love get paid when they get paid on Spotify. And the more clout Universal has, the more they can push hard on services like Spotify to get better deals for themselves. And Spotify only has so much money. So Spotify is going to have to start either charging more to its subscription service or paying less on these independent artists, and maybe those independent artists are going to have to go somewhere else,
or charging more for ads.
Charging more for ads, sure, or playing more ads, letting you not have as many track plays per ad that you listen to. It's I think in any time a company as big as Universal buys up another company as big as EMI, even only 2/3 of it, it's bad for consumers. And it's especially bad in these nascent digital markets that are still growing, and we don't even really know what Spotify is. Spotify is just kind of one of the largest ones. There are, of course, a lot of services like Spotify, not just in the United States, but around the world. And of course, the rights for all those things are tricky. So it's hard to become a global company with a distribution service like that, especially a digital distribution service, because the laws are all still trying to figure out how digital things apply. It's going to be a really big problem for a lot of our favorite very cool web services.
Yep. Or another way to look at it is they're so big that they'll get less and less responsive to what people actually want, and it'll be the beginning of their end.
Right. And I think that is the key thing. That's the opening here, is that this, as they get more and more control and they start to bully people out of their music. So if they bully Spotify enough, eventually Spotify is going to say, screw it. We don't need you. We got a lot of other music in the world.
That's what
that's going to open up all that space. There's going to be a huge gap in people's listening habits that can be filled by independent artists.
Right. And it just depends on whether or not the ubiquity of Spotify and how, have people come to love it so much that if this leveraging kind of campaign begins, will Spotify be able to stand its ground? You know what I mean?
And I want to reiterate, we're using Spotify as kind of a stand-in for all awesome digital streaming services and related technologies. Right. Spotify is not the only company that Universal has to deal with on the internet. Have you guys used Songza yet? Have you tried Songza?
No, I've never even heard of it.
It's weird. I think it's songza.com, and you tell it like what mood you're in and what kind of music you like, and it tries to like match music to your mood. And it learns. It's a thumbs up, thumbs down thing like Pandora. You can teach it what you like.
I'm sure someday that stuff is really going to work well.
They're still learning. You still have to teach it.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not so jaded about that sort of endeavor. I think it's a really cool kind of thing.
What'd you say?
Okay, never mind. I've seen you talk several times, and Skype was eliminating your voice, and I'm like, I wonder if Nate's microphone is muted and he just doesn't.
You got to be a little more assertive, Nate.
Keep losing that battle for for airwaves.
Just shout over us.
Right.
Guys.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun. You can have your mix for game day, waking up, reading the paper, recovering from last night.
Because they change it every day. So recovering from last night because it's Sunday morning as we record this, but they've got like a Monday morning get out of your weekend funk kind of jams on Monday. It's a fun thing. Friday they have like get ready for the weekend jams and that kind of thing.
When we have biometric feedback where it can just
sense how much you like it.
Sense your body chemistry with an implant or something and bases its playlist on that. That's where we're going.
Awesome. Can't wait. Sign me up.
What I don't understand. Go ahead, Nate. I'm sorry.
Judge your blood alcohol content against the time.
Yeah, when it reaches 0.07, it turns on who let the dogs out. The other thing, I was wondering if is there not a way, because anytime any pop song I want to hear, I mean, unless it's something from Bangladesh or something, I can find on YouTube. So I wonder why nobody's ever made like a vigilante kind of app that will you can put in any song you want. It'll basically just go find it on YouTube for you and play it. That seems like it might be a little bit illegal.
I think it would be definitely against the YouTube terms of service.
Yeah, but who doesn't use YouTube to listen to pop music,
Yeah, and when you find the one that's up there legally, it's got a ad in front of it. Pro tip, in political season for YouTube ads, YouTube only gets paid by the advertiser when the ad for those ones where you can skip.
Mm-hmm.
The advertiser only has to pay YouTube if the whole ad plays. And for the ones that you can click on, they get paid. They have to pay if you click on them. So if you're watching an ad for a political individual or party or group that you don't like, click on their ad. Right?
Make them pay.
Because then they have to pay a quarter.
They have to pay a quarter to somebody who's not going to be swayed.
Right. And then if you're watching one for somebody that you like, then skip it. Don't watch it.
And then
they
but
don't pay.
It won't have the image of saying how many views it had or anything. You'd be like, oh man, this had 4 million views or 4 million plays or
who cares?
Or this is
who cares?
Yeah, but that says
it's
something.
money. Money talks.
All right.
Money talks and click-throughs walk. See what I did there? Let's move on. We've got another story.
We have a whole guest to go over too, by the way.
We do. That's why we're going to do the story, and then we're going to go to the guest. We should have said that at the top of the show. We had lovely pianist Vicky Chow on the show this week, and we had to pre-tape the interview, so we'll get to that in a minute. But Rob Deemer had a great piece on New Music Box this week, speaking of independent creators, about some new, I guess, a new service from J.W. Pepper, who you may know as a sheet music distributor and I guess online retailer. I don't know if they have brick and mortar store. Anyway, they have a new service that they just launched a few weeks ago for composers who want somebody else to print their music out and send it off to people when they buy it. And this is just one of the many services that are available for composers to use who want to kind of offload a lot of the publishing responsibilities in their music to somebody else. And not every composer is interested or ready for a big-time publisher, but there are more and more services coming from publishers, coming from retailers, and this one is from a music distributor. Is this something you guys would use? Would you sell your music through J.W. Pepper's new system, whose name I don't remember anymore?
MyScore.
MyScore. Would you use it, Sam?
No, I mean, I don't think so, unless, like, people make the point that the only way I would use this is if I were getting so many requests for scores that I couldn't keep up personally.
But at the same time, you say that, but we talked to Jennifer Higdon last week, and she gets a bunch of requests for scores, and she does it herself. John Mackey gets, I'm sure, even more than that, and he does it himself. He probably has a staff now, but it's in-house.
I think it's for people who are getting that kind of number of orders, but just don't want to or have the money to not have to worry about doing it themselves, you know? To me,
I wonder how if they're willing to take that cut and let someone else do the work. I mean, it's like hiring somebody, I guess.
Yeah, it just depends on how much it is and how much you think it's worth compared to what you would make if you did it yourself.
Right, and this is an important thing to remember. With this service and a lot of similar services, the composer keeps their copyright, and they keep, in a lot of cases, the publisher's part of the royalty. So those of you who are familiar with ASCAP and BMI and CSAC performance royalties, the publisher gets half and the songwriter/composer gets half. So if the composer gets their half and they're a self-publisher, then they also get the publisher's half. But if they're published by somebody else, then the publisher gets the publisher's half. And this is allowing the composer to still take the publisher's part of the royalties, and it's just a split on the sales of the stuff. So
right.
the physical goods sales, and it's the composer gets 25% of printed sales and 40% of digital sales. So that's a lot. That's a lot more than any normal publishing deal. Normally it's like 10-15% ish.
Plus,
of
bucks to set it up and $25 a year too.
Sure, it's $100 to set up the thing. You get a web page site thing. You get kind of like a profile page there, and you can have links to places to listen to your stuff. You can have a bio and a photo and your Twitter and the normal sorts of things, and then you can direct people to that to buy your music. And so that's kind of what the setup fee's for. And then there's an annual fee if you don't sell. I think the minimum is like $400 or something. There's an annual fee of $25, which that's fine because they have to pay to have your stuff, and it's not like Facebook; they don't have ads on the side or anything. So I think that's reasonable. I think the price is very reasonable for what it is. But Sam, like you said, I do value my time, but I don't value it highly enough to pay somebody else to do all this stuff for me.
I mean, for me to use that, I'd have to be doing like thousands and thousands of dollars worth of scores a year. And also,
you're not? Is that what you're saying now?
I am not. Well, yes, I am, because I charge $1,200 for a score.
And you've sold one this year.
No. I think this is a useful. And we all know these people because we all studied composition in college. The guy who is, sort of maybe even technophobic and not techno savvy, but because it's their career, they have learned how to do finale really, really, really well. So from a technical standpoint, they can make their own perfectly beautiful score, but they don't care about and don't know anything about any of the other stuff, like even converting it to a PDF or anything, I think there's lots of people out there who have a really firm understanding of finale or Sibelius or whatever and can make beautiful scores, but neither care nor know anything about any of the other technical aspects of being a DIY publisher, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. And this is something we come back to a lot on this show, I feel like, when we're talking about composers and being professional composers, is that we all have to strike a balance between how much time we want to spend being an awesome composer, like practicing everything that we have to do to make good music, right? Writing music and editing music and all those things to make the best art that we can. We have to balance that with all the other things that are expected of us as professionals in this industry. We have to produce physical things and give them to people so that they can play our music. We have to maintain our kind of public, what do you want to call it? We have to have people like Patrick doing our public relations. Usually we're going to do those ourselves on the web. We have to maintain our recordings. All these things that we have to do that traditionally may have been done by other people, we as kind of lower income individuals, or maybe lower revenue individuals, I should say, as composers, have to do a lot of these things ourselves. And the more money you spend on paying other people to publish your music, or paying other people to, I don't know what else you would do. But anyway, that's less money that you make on your stuff, but more time you have to spend on it.
Well, just as an example, for instance, I looked up coil binders, and they're like, a decent one is like $300. So that's another way to think about it. Like, if you're going to do it yourself and you don't have all the startup stuff, like, one thing would be like a super large format printer would be nice, because that's all know that
$10,000.
Yeah, 11 by 17, chopping it down is not what, standard sheet music comes on. And a binder, and so getting all that infrastructure stuff set up is not cheap,
So something to keep in mind is that you can get somebody else to do these things for you, especially if you're in a pinch, especially if you have a day job. A lot of us have day jobs. Deemer had a great quote in here from John Mackey saying that he considers that to be his day job. So some composers teach for their day job. John Mackey is essentially a publisher for his day job. He is his own publisher. So that's an interesting way to think of it. Any last thoughts before we move on? We have a weird pick of the week this week, sort of. Sam, do you want to do it?
The pick of the week.
It sounds so bad.
That was weird. So our pick of the week this week.
I don't have any idea what that sounds like.
Well,
me, I don't hear myself.
Oh, well, you'll hear it on the recording. Our pick of the week this week is a piece recorded by our guest this week, Vicky Chow. And we're going to play a clip from Ryan Francis's Etudes for Piano called Harlequin, which was written for her. And she'll talk about that a little bit in this interview. Patrick, do you want to maybe set up this interview a little bit that we recorded?
Yeah, so, like David mentioned, we earlier this week, we had the pleasure of talking to Vicky Chow, who's the pianist for Bang on a Can All-Stars. This is our first Bang on a Can member, so we're really excited to hear about what it's like being a member of the group and her career, how she came about, performing new music. So take a listen, and we hope you enjoy. Vicky, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So you've enjoyed a lot of great collaborations, being with the Bang on a Can All-Stars. You've worked with Kronos Quartet, the Detroit New Music Ensemble, many others. You went to Juilliard, and you currently reside in New York City, which is a great hub for making new music as it exists there in great amount. I wanted to ask you, I mean, just as we start off here, has living in New York since you came here really changed your impression of new music and the culture that kind of surrounds it here in the city?
Well, I have to admit, like, I was in New York before I started doing new music. I had a very classical upbringing, and I was kind of going along the route of, being the orchestral soloist, playing with an orchestra or doing classical repertoire. I never really started doing new music until maybe in 2007, like 5 years ago. So I wouldn't be able to say like whether or not coming to New York has changed, my idea or my perception of what new music versus before, because I didn't have that. I first kind of stumbled across like new music. I was kind of just a little bit dissatisfied with what I was doing in my life at the time, which was I was at Juilliard. I was doing my undergrad. I was doing my master's in classical performance, and
right.
When you're in that kind of realm, you're kind of geared towards like, try and win the competition or something.
Exactly.
That's the ultimate goal, as a pianist.
Just to win things, right?
To win all these awesome, the Queen Elizabeth, whatever, and you play the hammer clavier and you do like whatever, like all the standard repertoire that you do at these competitions, and that was kind of what was happening. And I realized during that time there I was just really unhappy. Like I knew I loved music and I really wanted to do it, and just realized it's not making it. I can't do this for the rest of my life.
Right.
One day, basically, a friend of mine just who was a composer. There were composers at Juilliard, but for some reason, I never thought to play their music, or they never asked. It was just one of those things. So that's when I started in 2007. A friend of mine had just asked me to play, and that's when I kind of dove in. So
from then on, was it just new music for you?
Yeah, like basically from that moment on in 2000s, I just like started. That's all I've been doing since then. And from there, I graduated from Juilliard Masters, and I went up to Manhattan School of Music. That's when they first started the contemporary performance program.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, it was Patty Johnson who was the director. She's left since then, and there's been multiple different directors at that program. But that's kind of where I began to just take in and understand what this world of music is about. Well,
that's really great to hear, because I mean, so many people out there are new music aficionados, the current company included. So, it's great to see someone who just really takes the initiative to promote this kind of music and work with composers.
Yeah, I mean, there was a feeling. It was just really strange because, you go to a school and everybody is working on the same repertoire. Everyone's doing the same concerto, same Beethoven sonata, and so it becomes not about the music. It becomes the performer. So, and that's fine too. But then, what I really enjoyed doing about doing new music is the fact that like you're actually getting to explore. You're getting to experience. You're getting to collaborate. Right. Making it on your own, especially as a pianist, you spend countless hours like in a room by yourself, and then you go on stage by yourself, and then you go home by yourself. It's like you're by yourself all the time, and you don't get to collaborate. And so one of the first things I really appreciated was the fact that like there is a whole new world And also the fact that you can just ask the questions directly to the person, like, hey, what did you mean by that? Like, what does this mean? Can you please tell me what kind of articulation what are you hearing? Like, there's also notation is a whole nother thing. Like, it can be interpreted in so many different ways, Really, it can be one little dot, or a forte can be so. It's very open and very loose. So I'm very happy to be able to just get the answers directly and work with people.
Right.
Sorry, my dog is here and she farts. Stop.
That's great.
That's okay. I was actually wondering if you could also speak. We're huge fans of Bang on a Can, and your participation in the Bang on a Can All Stars. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about how you really got involved. Perhaps with David and Julia and everyone in the organization to.
They had a call for pianists. They were looking for somebody, and I guess I got an email that was passed on to me from the director of the Manhattan School. At that, it was not Patty Munson, but it was Dan Graboy, who is in the Meridian Arts Ensemble. He's a horn player. He's now at the University of Wisconsin, I think. He's left. But anyways, at that time, he was there, and he passed on this information that they were still looking for a pianist. I guess Lisa Moore at that. And Bang on a Can, they've already kind of split ways. And even though they've been working with different pianists, they haven't filled that spot or position. They haven't found the right person or whatever.
Mm.
And so I just sent in a resume. They just wanted a resume. So they didn't even want to tape. They just wanted a resume or website. And then I called in for an audition, which is not the same as any other audition I've ever had. I just got 7 excerpts of their repertoire. I went in there. I remember it was like the very end of the day. I think I was the last person that they were auditioning, and it was like for 45 minutes or something. And I went in there, and I just played with them, the 7 excerpts. I got to sit in, and I went in there like Mark Stewart, Evan Ziporin, and Robert Black. They were all there. I was watching them play the pieces for them. And then a couple months later, they asked me to join them for their People's Commission concert, and I performed with them there at Merkin. And this was in February or the beginning of 2009. And I thought the audition went well with Bang. I thought the performance went well, but then I didn't hear from them for like 6 months, I remember. And by that time, it was the summertime, and they contacted me, and they're like, oh, we're going to go to China. Can you come on tour with us? And I'm like, sure. I decided to go back to school at that point. So I had to basically miss like the first 2 months, like first month of school or whatever. Went on tour with them, and then I came back, and at that time, they kind of narrowed it down between me and another pianist. And then in November, they decided to ask me to join the group officially.
Great.
So, and since then, it's just been it's been great. We're always performing different musics all the time.
So it's interesting that when you were describing the audition experience with them, you said, so they sent me a bunch of excerpts, and then I sat in with them. Like, you actually said those words, which is sort of like something that's associated with like, a popular music or a jazz, kind of world. Does playing in the Bang on a Can setting feel different in some sort of fundamental way to like, if you're asked to play the piano part on, a Brahms piece or, chamber music or whatever, is there something fundamentally different about that musical experience and the way you play and interact?
Yeah, because well, first of all, coming from the classical world, I think we all know whenever you do an audition, you're always being watched. Like, there's a panel of people sitting there watching you, and then they may even stop you. Okay, that's enough. All right, can you play, the second movement of whatever? They do that. At least for piano auditions, they do that. It's like, okay, start with whatever you want, and then they listen to literally about 30 seconds, and they're like, okay, thank you. But you prepared an hour-long program, and they only listen to 5 to 10 minutes of everything that you play, that you've prepared. But with this, even though they played through everything. It's not like they were like, okay, I'm going to judge you if you're a good enough player or not. I don't think at that point, like, they were not. I think it was really trying to find like the right chemistry between people. So you can't just watch from afar. So a lot of the way that we were auditioned, I think we had to just play together, and get the feel, because I think you wouldn't be able to get that kind of same experience if you didn't play with the other person. So that was a first for me. I've never done anything like that before. It was definitely one of the most auditions I ever had. I remember leaving and I was just like ecstatic. I was just like, oh my God, that was so much fun. It felt like a performance,
Right.
and I've been very lucky that I've been able to continue that kind of feeling.
I mean, certainly it's different than, I might say different than an orchestra, playing together. I mean, there's a sense of intimacy with, with your fellow musicians, but I think, being in such a smaller group like that.
I guess the biggest difference I've noticed playing, I guess, bang on hand repertoire or just new music in general, I do have to say, like, most of the things I do is kind of more within the bang on a can world, and I work with a lot of different people stemming from that family kind of. It's how do I put it? There is
Basically a sense of chemistry that just
there's a chemistry, but there's also, it's just I feel.
Well, I would like to say, Vicky, that your reaction is actually kind of confirming what I was getting at. That seems what I think I might be suggesting is that the kind of experience you have in that setting, where it's definitely, the Western classical art music tradition, bang on a can, but it's different in some kind of way because it relies on chemistry between players and interaction and feeling almost like a band. And that's a sensation that is typically not, there's no discussion of it or there's no acknowledgement of it in schooling that you get in the Western art music tradition. I would say, by and large, you don't get it. But, this seems to be a very forward-looking ensemble, and the fact that you, who have a very high level of pedigree in your education, haven't experienced this kind of sensation until you were with that ensemble. That's kind of what I was trying to tease out, because I'm always trying to get back at, like, so what does this teach us about our educational experience as musicians, and what might we be teaching people in school that would prepare them better for these situations?
Well, let's see. I think, okay, we're going to talk about like kind of educational things that are lacking, I think.
You seem like you have a lot to say.
I don't. You're talking about there's so many layers here. But
we don't need you to call out any particular teachers or institutions that you've worked with.
No, but it's just, okay, I think the most general one that, okay, before I go back to the first question, which I kind of like didn't answer or did answer by not answering, but I guess it's hard because when you go to a conservatory, at least I'm coming from a very, very like one kind of education in classical music. Like I went, I grew up in Vancouver, and then I went to Juilliard. Straight up like conservatory. There are other people who didn't do that, and they have a very different experience. But I think there is a consensus that there is a lack of focus on the business aspect of music in the training.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that's true in other places, but certainly at Juilliard it was like that, and at Manhattan School. I only went to the contemporary performance program. I don't know how they are in their orchestral program or the other areas in their school, other departments. But it seemed like that's not a requirement. It never is a requirement to take a business class in music. And their main focus is just practice and play your instrument very well. And that, I'm sorry, that's, as we all know, like once you get out of school, that doesn't cut it. You can't just survive purely on the fact that you're an amazing whatever, whatever instrument you're on. Like there's all these different sets of skills that you need, to prepare you. And they don't prepare you for the outside world. That's what's lacking. But in terms of musical situations to prepare you for these things, I was never prepared for a Bang on a Can audition. I was never prepared to play the music that I actually do now. And I'm very surprised. If you ask me, even 6 years ago, okay, even 2005, okay, I'm like surprised. It's 2012 now. I think back to way back then, and I would have never thought I would be doing what I'm doing now. There was nothing that was even remotely on my radar. I think that I'd be doing what I'm doing now, and nothing would have prepared me to be doing what I'm doing now, except for what I'm doing right now. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. The only experience you can get from, or the only way you can learn is actually just getting that experience, But maybe that's the thing. I don't know, like, maybe it takes a certain type of personality or something. Like I'm very stubborn. I like to be very hands-on. And so when things are not working or things don't happen, then I'm always very like, oh, why doesn't it work? I want to find out why. How do we do it? Like I'll dig to the bottom of things. At least I try to. I might not do a very good job, but that's my personality. And I think, there's nothing that can really prepare you from like hands-on experience and applying your knowledge, right? So
that ability to dig in, that seems like a big asset in the new music world, where you, especially in the collaboration. And so you found that to be a pretty good relationship with you and the other Bang on the Can members?
I think I have learned so much from being with them the past 3 years than I ever have in my entire musical life. Wow. Everybody no, I'm serious. Like, like Evan Zaporin, he's an amazing musician. He's an amazing composer, amazing performer. Mark Stewart, Robert Black, David Costin, and Ashley Bathgate, too, the new cellist in the group. Every one of them have been so amazing. I have learned so much just from playing with them and just from knowing them. Like, seriously, I think back before, like, pre-Bang and like post-Bang, kind of. Yeah.
There's a pretty easy pun in there somewhere. The big.
There's all kinds of jokes. You don't know whether it's a guy that likes dirty jokes or a guy that's an expert on the universe and the cosmos.
Yeah, right. So
hey, this is a family show.
Yeah, but we noticed that. So you're part of the typical music ensemble with Todd Reynolds and Ashley Bathgate. So, how do you like working with them? It seems like you've taken to it well.
Yeah, no, it's been really great. I mean, how we started playing together was there was a piece by Evan called "Typical Music." It's a trio, and we started playing this piece a couple years ago, and it brought us together. I mean, obviously, I already worked with Ashley in the group, but we've never worked in a more intimate, configuration, instrumentation. And of course, Todd, I met him like 5 years ago down in Miami at this like new music marathon concert. I met him then, and he heard me play, and he was like, "Wow, you're awesome!" And then we never collaborated together. And then finally, we got to play together for the first time then, and it was total chemistry. And we're coming down to Grand Rapids. We're doing a show there. And we're doing like a private concert this Saturday here in New York. And it's really great. I mean, I love working with them, and they're really great people to hang out with. And we're kind of taking it easy. We're taking it slow. We're not like, okay, we're going to like conquer the new music world and like play music everywhere and commission this and that and that and that. And that.
Right.
Yeah, taking it easy. Things are happening. And I think, at least for me, I just love making music with them. So, you know, for me, the importance of like, making sure that we just perform everywhere and, you know, that's not like, I'm just, every time I play with them, I feel like it's like a therapy session. It's like afterwards I feel so great. I'm like, yeah, I'm happy just playing in my living room. I'm sure we'll try and bring that to other places too.
Yeah, we look forward to it.
Yeah.
So Vicky, I mean, we'd like to, you know, touch on your album a little bit that came out a little bit back, which is it's Works for Piano, entitled Works for Piano, and they're works by Ryan Francis. Now, I was wondering if you could just kind of touch on how you got involved in the production of this album, what your relationship is, you know, as performer and composer. Did you guys collaborate a lot on the actual composition of the pieces? Did you have a lot to say, or you know, basically was this just, you know, here are my works and put out an album?
Hold on one second. I'm going to grab the album.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
But Ryan Francis is
cool.
Yeah.
So I met Ryan when we were both at Juilliard. He actually did his undergrad at the University of Michigan. And I think he was studying with Susan Boddy then, which now she is actually at Manhattan School of Music. I met Ryan when I was still at school at Juilliard, and by then he had already, there are 4 pieces. I mean, there are a set of etudes, a set of preludes, and 2 larger works. And when I had met him then, he had already written 2 of the larger works. And since I met him, he was working on these etudes for piano, in which one of them was written for me and dedicated to me, and it's the second one called Harlequin. By that time, he had written a couple preludes called the Weinberg preludes, based off of Haruki Murakami's Weinberg Chronicles. How this album became, how it got started, it was in 2000. In 2008, I went out to Princeton to do a concert. I was sharing a recital with Sylvie Courvoisier, who's a composer, pianist, improviser, who at that time I didn't know was good friends with John Zorn. On that program, I was doing a piece by Neil Rolnick, and I did a piece like the Messiaen, one of the movements from Avant-Garde, and I did like a lady etude, and then I also did the sets of etudes, 6 of them. And Sylvie heard my performance of it and really loved it, and she was like, oh, you have to meet a friend of mine, and he's a composer, you know, do you mind if I pass your information to him? And I'm like, sure, why not? And then literally 2 days later, I get an email from John Zorn, and he's like, oh, I checked out your website, and I hear these 2 Ryan Francis etudes, and they're really great, and it'll make a really awesome release on Zadig. And I'm sure, yeah.
And the rest is history.
And that was in 2008, and it was really great because he basically said, like, okay, here's the deal. Basically, you know, take as much time as you want, take as little time as you want, you know, take this and use this as a learning experience and a learning opportunity. if you have any questions about it, just, ask me. And it was so great. It was like I never ever did a recording before, and it was he just basically allowed that opportunity to happen. There was great opportunity for both Ryan and I.
I mean, I think that's what every performer probably, that's their dream, is just to have that open door. But
if you think about it, like, that open door is there all the time. It's just the fact that someone said, go do it. And then you're like, oh, wow, I can do it. Given the fact, okay, like, different labels have different, arrangements, like financially, whatever budget, like they do provide a budget, but some other labels, they don't. But no, it's true. It's whatever, all the opportunities are there. The possibilities are endless. It's like whether or not you're going to, for example, if you wanted to, you could stay up all night today and be like, okay, I'm going to stay up until 8 in the morning and I'm going to write a little 1-minute snippet every hour and record it or something and put it online tomorrow. And if that's a project, you could do it, but it's just whether or not people do it. And I guess for me, like, I never even realized, hey, if I wanted to record an album, I can totally do it. Like now I have that knowledge. Like, now I'm like, okay, I'm going to record my next album, and I'm working on that right now. But before I didn't. So it's really, really great. So no, I didn't collaborate with Ryan on these pieces. But like I said, he did write the second etude for me. And if you hear the second etude, it's called Harlequin. I don't know what you can take it, as how you want to interpret what he thinks of me. But a lot of those preludes are really cute. They're very beautiful. They have a lot of quotations from standard repertoire, like from Schumann and Mozart and such. And Rossini, like especially the opening prelude. It's based off of the opening chapter in the Wynberg Chronicles, where the guy is making spaghetti and listening to Rossini, the thieving magpie, and the woman. I don't know have you guys read?
No.
Okay. If there are any Tommy fans watching, or if you don't, then pick up. I don't know. Go find that chapter, because it's also in one of the short stories collections of Murakami's, but it's basically talking about this guy who's making spaghetti and listening to the song, and he gets this really, really eerie phone call from this woman, and that's kind of like how the story begins. It goes into some really crazy places. Yeah. Okay. So stop me because I start babbling.
That's all right. Tell us. So you mentioned that you have this project made you discover that you can just make a recording, and that's something that anybody's capable of doing. So, and that you also mentioned that you're working on right now. Tell us about the one that you're working on right now. And I assume this is a project that you yourself instigated, as opposed to somebody else coming to you and say, hey, let's do this thing. So I'm curious to hear about what this next recording project is and how you set about putting it together on your own.
Well, basically, I mean, on top of doing all the Ryan Francis works, I've been, and on top of doing Bang the Can and stuff, I've been continuing, like, trying to do solo performances. So I have basically accumulated a bunch of really awesome solo pieces that I've been performing. But and a lot of times people are like, oh, is there a recording of it? Do you have a recording? And I don't. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm like, okay, I need to document some of these things that I'm performing and put it into album. And I mean, it's really in the beginning stages of it. Like there are multiple projects happening right now, and so I'm trying to. I'm hoping that this recording will probably come out maybe like end of next year or something. If latest, maybe early 2014. Or maybe sooner. I don't know. I actually have 2 different recording projects that I want to do. So there's a lot of there's a lot of different things that I'm working on. But I'll just say that much, because right now there's not much to review.
Well, we certainly look forward to either one of these that are coming
all
up.
of them.
And when that comes out, please, we'll certainly be in touch. We'd love to.
For sure.
Give it some play on our little podcast here.
And I'm looking
So-
forward to seeing you this upcoming week, playing out here in Allendale too.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, is you feel free to. Is there anything else coming up that you'd like to tell everybody about?
Plug away.
Plug away. Let's see. Well, yeah, I do. Okay, on the side, I run a small little like music series here in New York called Contagious Sounds, and it's held at the Gershwin Hotel. And it's usually once a month. This fall usually becomes kind of crazy and doesn't happen all the time, but there is one show happening coming up very soon. It's on October 1st, and it's featuring a very dear friend of mine, Lisa Dowling, on bass, and she's really fantastic. She is like writing her own stuff. Now she's singing, and she's doing a lot of very extended stuff on her instrument. And she's doing a show, and I stream it live online. I do it via Ustream, actually.
Cool.
So,
Great.
8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, and it's, if you tune in, it's free, obviously. So hopefully people will check that out. But in terms of performance, I have, besides banging on piano stuff, I have a piano duo concert, but that's not until November. That may be a little bit too far away, and it's going to be in The Hague in Amsterdam, and it's going to be very interesting. It's with a pianist called her name is Saskia Lancourt, and she's the pianist for the awesome new music group called Ensemble Klang, that's based in The Hague. And so we have a couple concerts in Holland in November, and we're doing a new piece by Australian composer who's living in The Hague, Kate Moore. We're doing a selection of 1 minute, 2 piano pieces by Evan Zapporn. Him and his wife had a challenge for each other like a couple years ago, I think, like during the month of December. They were like, okay, we're going to write 100-minute long pieces. I don't know why, but they just did. And so he sent me the score, and so we're going to do a selection of them. We're going to do like, I don't know, 20 of them or something.
Great.
And we're going to be doing a John Luther Adams piece, Dark Waves, and David Lang's Orpheus Over and Under, and that's in November. I will say one more thing, and it probably isn't too soon to say. It should be okay. But okay, so Steve Reich has a piece called Six Pianos. And recently, like last year, there's a pianist named Vincent Corver that did a 1-piano arrangement of this piece, so therefore called Piano Counterpoint. And as we all know, there's no piano counterpoint. There's piano phase, Steve Reich, but no piano counterpoint. So anyways, so I'm working, I guess, with Steve and making, basically making an arrangement and another arrangement and making a patch for my own performance in Vancouver of Piano Counterpoint, which should be a world premiere of this piece. Like, I guess the person who made the arrangement recorded it, but hasn't performed it yet in public. So I have a performance in January in Vancouver, and it's Steve Reich's Piano Counterpoint, which is kind of cool. 6 pianos basically, but I'm working with a friend on a
great.
So yeah,
Cool.
Looking forward to that. Well, Vicky, it's so great talking to you. I'm so glad you were able to drop by and talk to us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's very nice to meet you guys on.
Anytime. You're welcome. You're welcome on the show anytime.
So that was Vicky Chow. We had a great time talking to her. That's going to do it for this week's SoundNotion. Thank you so much for joining us, whether you joined us live at soundnotion.tv/live, or if you're watching this recorded in video or audio format. We would love to hear what you have to say about any of the things that Vicky Chow talked about, or any of the stories we talked about today, the universal buyout of EMI, any of the orchestra business that we probably got wrong, or your thoughts on self-publishing or 50 Shades of Grey. Give us your book review of 50 Shades of Grey. We would love to hear all about it. don't do that. But we would love to hear about all those other things. You can leave us a comment on our site, soundnotion.tv/SN. You can leave a note there. You can send us an email there. And you can also contact us on Facebook or Twitter. We're happy to continue this conversation with you there. We're at SoundNotion as a group. We're also all individually on Twitter. To catch every episode of this show and all our shows at soundnotion.tv, go to the iTunes store and subscribe there for free and have them downloaded to your device automatically. SoundNotion's introduction includes music by Patrick Gullo and video by Tyler Lepp. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you back next week.
Universal Music Group must die.
This is the book show.
That's right. Never had one lesson.